Hello everyone and welcome to the latest edition of Why the Hell Do We Care? Today we have quite a few new samurai warriors and another extra dimensional ninja to add to our lineup. First, let's discuss our lone new dynasty warrior with Liu Shan. Liu Shan was born in 207 AD and was first playable in Dynasty Warrior 7. He's the eldest son of Liu Bei and succeeds him as the second ruler of Shu. As a leader, he does not compare well to his father. Historically, he was highly incompetent and pretty much passed on his duties to others. He was easily influenced by flattery, and that pretty much led to Huang Hao pretty much becoming the leader of Shu. When Wei was pushing into Shu territory, Jiang Wei urged him to strengthen the defenses, but Huang Hao advised against it. Liu Shan went with Huang Hao's advice, and Shu was easily overwhelmed by Wei's forces and he surrendered to Wei. In-game, he is not shown to be that incompetent. He still is not up to his father's standards, but he does at least try to do the best for Shu. The best way I can describe his in-game personality is Space Cadet. Supposedly it's a ruse he keeps out of fear, but normally he seems like someone who just got high and is thinking deep thoughts. Now, let's see if he can fight with his rapier better than he leads. Liu Shan is a wonder type with an extremely fast attack string. This is kinda good and kinda bad. It's kind of like my issues with Benkei. The timing on his charge attacks is fairly tricky. His weapon is also pretty thin, so it's hard to judge the timing based on sight. His C3 is probably his most standout charge combo, as it hits many times and finishes into a pretty wide hitting crowd clearer with his EX attack. His C4 is a basic crowd clearer with nothing special attached. His C5 is different from most launchers since it is really several strong stabs that heavily launches on the last hit. His C6 is a decent ranged shockwave attack. His Musou is alright, just a giant lightning bolt he sends out in the line. It is kinda slow to come out, but he is invincible during it, so its only risk is that it could be blocked. His ground R1 makes him invincible and slowly regenerate life, which is always handy, and his aerial R1 makes the lightning fall all around him for a bit. His passive is Thrift, which is always awesome for reducing Musou costs. Overall, Liu Shan is decent. His range and attack power aren't that great, but he is very fast to attack and his ground R1 gives him some advantages. Muneshige Tachibana joined the cast in Samurai Warriors 3 and was born in 1567 AD. He is either the 10th or the 11th adopted head of the Tachibana clan. He fought for control of the island of Kyushu against the Shimazu clan. During these battles, he is forced to leave his birth father Juon Takahashi when Juon orders him to retreat and protect his own life. After losing many battles and his father to the Shimazu, the Toyotomi arrive and assist them in beating back the Shimazu and eventually conquering them. Since they were indebted to the Toyotomi for their aid against the Shimazu, Muneshige joined Mitsunari's western army against Ieyasu's eastern army at Sekigahara. After the western armies lost, the Tachibana are conquered and dissolved, and Muneshige and Ginshio decide to wander the land together as landless samurai. Personality-wise, he wants to be the cool hero, but is plagued with doubts about the times he lives in and the loss of life around him. He deeply cares for his wife, and even though they may clash, he will do anything to protect her when she is in trouble. Now, let's see how well he swords and boards with his large claymore and shield. Muneshige is a power type and is pretty good. His S-string has good range and decent attack speed, so he doesn't leave himself open to attack. His charge attacks have a surprising amount of ranged shockwave attacks. His C4 is a wide shockwave attack that most people don't get till their final moves. His C5 gets points for style as he throws his shield in the air and slams the ground to jiggle his enemies. His C6 is a basic shield rush charge attack. His C7 is another shockwave attack that hits in a cross pattern for decent damage. His C8 is a pretty great crowd clear as he fills the area around him with dark energy. His final C9 attack is a rapid stab attack that really isn't very impressive. His ground R1 is a Captain America shield throw to shockwave attack, and his aerial R1 is another rushing shield charge. His Musou is very weird, as he just runs forward, then slashes, then repeats. Not really a fan, so I just use his Musou for invincibility. His passive is powered, which boosts other power types in the group, so handy in those kind of teams. Overall, Muneshige is pretty good with very few openings in his attacks and some good ranged options. His Musou is weird, but not enough to kill his character. Kiyomasa Kato was born in 1562 AD and first joined the lineup in Samurai Warriors 3. Kiyomasa came from a poor background but was raised with Hideyoshi's patronage. He sees Hideyoshi's wife Nene as a second mother to him and holds her in very high regard. He is also our second member of the trio of Masanori Fukushima, himself, and Mitsunari Yoshida. He is the wall that protects Hideyoshi's legacy to the point that he joins Ieyasu's forces at the Battle of Sekigahara against his friend Mitsunari because he believed that it would be the most reliable way to keep the Toyotomi clan alive after Hideyoshi's death. Kiyomasa is fiercely loyal and the most mature in the trio and is always trying to look out for Masanori and clashes with Mitsunari when he is being cocky or hard-headed. Now let's see how he cuts his foes down with his halberd. Kiyomasa is a pretty decent power type. None of his moves are really overly flashy, however he is very beginner friendly. His S-string hits at a decent speed and in a decently wide arc. His C1 combo breaks guard, although the third follow-up hit can miss if the enemy gets knocked back. His C2 is a launcher combo and has some pretty decent damage to it. His C3 doesn't have any real special properties to it, it's just a decent stabbing combo. His C4 is a pretty good crowd clearer with multiple wide sweeping attacks. His Musou is your basic Samurai Warriors Musou of multiple hits while invincible. His ground R1 draws enemies in, so it's good for taking out groups, while his aerial is a straight up aerial beatdown. His passive is Solidarity, which reduces damage from enemy officers, which can be very handy in harder difficulties. Overall, Kiyomasa isn't the flashiest fighter or the most damaging, but he is very solid and has no glaring weaknesses to his style. Nagamasa Azai was born in 1545 AD and was first playable in Samurai Warriors 2. He is best known for his betrayal of the Oda. The basic setup for the scenario was Nagamasa allied with the Oda through a political marriage between himself and Nobunaga Oda's sister Oichi. When the Asakura clan revolted against the Oda clan, the Azai sided with them instead of honoring their alliance with the Oda. The in-game reasoning behind this varies, like the Azai's heavy ties with the Asakura, or, in Samurai Warriors 4, he has some disagreements with some of Nobunaga's extreme measures, but he also admires Nobunaga and thinks he is a great person and his ambition is to go beyond him and become even greater. The Asakura revolt seemed to be his best chance to achieve his ambition. Before his death, he sent Oichi back to the Oda to keep her from harm. His personality is generally a very optimistic one, and he believes in his ideals of honor and justice, and does everything he can to bring about his peaceful world. Now let's see how well he charges with his lance. Nagamasa is a long string speed type. As you might guess from his weapon, his attacks are very forward focused, although there's a surprising lot of swiping with his lance in his S-string. As a long string attacker, he has a lot of charge attacks and variety to work with. Instead of his C4 being his crowd clearer, it's actually a charging attack. His C5 is an AoE knockup and can be used to clear groups over his C4. His C6 is also a decent crowd clearer, but it takes longer to get out than the C5, so I mainly use the C5. His C7 is an unblockable throw, so he can take on turtling opponents easily. His C8 is a great move for taking out officers, as it hits multiple times in a stabbing fashion before ending with a giant horizontal shockwave. His C9 is alright, but it's not as good as his C8. His ground R1 is of course him charging through with his lance, while his aerial is a ground slam. His Musou follows Musashi-style Musou attacks, being totally stationary with rapid attacks in a small area, this time with stabbing. His passive is Fellowship, which increases damage to switching combos, and I'm sure you all have noticed how much I don't use those, so it's not that great in my opinion. Overall, if you want someone charging the front lines, Nagamasa charges like the best of them, and since he is a speed type, he can escape with his air dashes. Ayane hails from the same universe and game series as Ryu Hayabusa. She is one of the main characters in the Dead or Alive series and is a supporting character for Ryu in the Ninja Gaiden games. I don't really play Dead or Alive, but from what I understand, most of her story has to do with her rivalry with her half-sister Kasumi, originally setting out to kill her for violating some rules of their ninja clan. In the first of the recent Ninja Gaiden games, she mainly sent Ryu messages advising the player on where to go and some other basic tutorial stuff. She got upgraded to playable character for a small section of the second game, and was downgraded for the third game. Now let's see how her ninja arts compare to our other ninjas. Ayane is a very speedy speed type. She is a lot like Ryu, except she traded power for even more speed. Her S string comes out very quickly and has a lot of big spin moves to hit all around her. Her charge attacks seem to focus more on kicking attacks than her weapons, with her C1 being a couple kicks finished up with a big spinning roundhouse. Her C2 is pretty great for officers as a launch to a throw combo. The throw also causes a shockwave when she collides her victim with the ground. Her C3 is more like other launchers, leaving his victim helpless in the air for a follow-up. Her C4 travels far, hits very wide, and finishes up with a big shockwave attack, and is probably my favorite move for her. Her C5 is just a spin move that hits around her and isn't really that great. Her Musou hits all around her with energy from one of her ninja spells. Her ground R1 is just a simple kunai toss follow-up with an explosion if it hits. Her aerial is pretty much the same, just in the air. Her passive is stamina, which we have seen several times. Same thing, nice to have but not really necessary. Overall, Ayane is a murder machine that can keep up with Ryu just fine. Well, that's it for today's episode. We have met emperors, betrayers, protectors, and even extra-dimensional ninjas. I'm Iono Bahamut, and I hope you will join me again next time.